Well, hello. Happy Friday afternoon, or maybe late Friday morning for those of you on the West Coast, like Sean Kester, who's on the line with us here today. I know Shannon, you're in the same time zone here as us in the Midwest. So we got a great topic here today that I know we certainly talk about a lot out when we're meeting with customers and prospects, and there's certainly been an enormous amount of content that's produced online around this important topic. I know I'll be talking about this at Dreamforce as well here in a couple months. Which is, how do you simplify your sales tech stack? And when we say simplify, it doesn't just mean like, hey, how do we use as little as possible? It means, how do we make sure to have a process that enables our salespeople and sales managers to operate at maximum productivity? So I'm thrilled to have with me here today Sean Kester, as well as who's the VP of Product Strategy for SalesLoft. As well as Shannon Millar, from the Director of Sales from League. So both will share a little bit more about their own themselves and their business as we get into this here today. So I'm going to start with a few just real quick intros. We'll get into the content, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. So if you do have questions along the way, go ahead and pop them into the chat or question window, and we'll field as many as we can when we get wrapped up. So. My name is Bob Marsh, founder and CEO of Level 11. I've spent my career about 20 years in sales and sales management. This is my fourth startup, first as CEO, but I've been from the very early bootstrap company to larger enterprises to growing from early stage through to several hundred people. So I've seen a lot of the different phases of growth the companies go through. I've advised many firms, and then building another one here at Level 11. So our business is really squarely focused on how do we help companies maximize the output of their sales team through what we call a modern sales management system. Completely focused on helping drive the behaviors and actions that lead to sales and enabling world-class frontline sales managers. So got some great brands we work with, and through this process, we have an opportunity to learn a whole bunch about the way these companies run their sales organizations, and it sure has evolved a lot, even over the last couple of years, let alone compared to what sales was like, say, 10 years ago. So with that, I will quickly hand it over to Sean to give a quick overview, a background on himself and SalesLoft.
Thanks, Bob. Excited to be here today and join you and Shannon. My name is Sean Kester, VP of Product Strategy at SalesLoft. I've been with the company about 4 years. And worn a bunch of different hats, starting from building out the SDR team all the way to now running the product strategy team. So SalesLoft is a platform that helps our customers engage more sincere with their buyers and set cadences, touch points of phone, email, and social. It has a big ecosystem of partners, and one in which the topic for today is very relevant when you talk about all the sales tools in the stack. How do you make sure that your teams are more efficient, and ultimately they adopt those tools to gain more ROI? And so SalesLoft built out this platform, which the core of it is the Cadence engine of touchpoint model that combines that phone, email, and social, as well as advanced analytics in that application ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Sean. Also on the line we have Shannon Millar from League. Shannon's actually a customer of both Level 11 and SalesLoft, so I think brings some unique perspective there, but part of a really exciting firm. So I'll let Shannon provide your own intro here.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today. I'm very excited to speak with everyone and speak about Level 11 as well as SalesLoft. So I'm one of the directors of sales here at League. Been in sales for 9 years. 7 of those years were actually at Salesforce. Recently made the jump over, been at League for about a year now, and really my first foray into this startup world, which is really exciting. And so excited to share with you my perspective of being both, on the side of a well-oiled sales team, and to one who is now really jumping into defining their processes and understanding how we're going to integrate our tech stack. Just as a brief introduction to League, so really what we're doing is taking your employee benefits offering and dragging it out of the Stone Age. Really right now it's something that employees don't think a lot about. It's maybe a checkbox for an employer to be able to offer that to their employees, but really what we want to help employers do is get value out of the money that they're spending and give a tool to their employees to help them be proactive proactive and preventative about their healthcare. So we're doing that through a fully digital offering. We have exciting new elements to our platform, like our chat functionality and our health concierge. And really, we just want to put the control back into your employees' hands to let them make the decisions about their health.
Cool. So Shannon said, to help kind of provide people some context, can you share a little bit more about the makeup and setup of your sales organization, how many folks in those different roles, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have about 30 people in sales here at League. We have about 4 in management. Our management team also consists of a very tightly collaborative relationship with our sales enablement manager and our sales operations manager. We then have a team of about 10 BDRs and SDRs, as well as account executives ranging from SMB to the commercial space.
Got it. Sounds like a very common setup these days. So, all right, cool. Well, good. We'll love to get your perspective along the way here, which I know we will. So, the quick agenda here for folks. So, as mentioned, kind of as we kind of gave the overview, I think why a lot of you signed up here is, first of all, how do you directionally define your sales process and your KPIs? Second is, how do you align and calibrate your sales technology to the way that you want your sales team to function? Then how do you enable and accelerate your sales team using this technology? And then finally, run what I like to call a closed loop management process, and we'll talk about what that's about. So to kick it off, in terms of when it comes to defining, what your sales process and KPIs are, I first like to kind of step back and, remember that, there's a very new generation of sellers today. The way that our frontline salespeople not only function in the market, but the world that they grew up in, the world that they've lived in over the last several years is very different than sometimes what maybe the executives that run the organization and try to design a lot of this went through themselves. What I mean by that is, through technology, mobile phones, social media, et cetera, everyone is very used to and now expects immediate access to information and answers. They also get easily distracted, which can sometimes be difficult, but also the reality is you just kind of have to understand and embrace this and help people stay focused on what matters. The other thing that really is unique and different these days is that, salespeople are craving. They want some structure, they want some direction, they want some coaching, and they want that to be consistent, and they want it to be structured. So I can tell you, it didn't really often work like that 10, 20 years ago, where salespeople just want to be left alone. Let me hit my number, and I'll talk to you at the end of the quarter. It's very different today, where you're kind of real time managing sales reps day to day. So you've also got in many. This isn't really a sign of the times or a generational thing. Like when you have every company is generally has a group of new frontline sales managers. So when you think about it, when you're a frontline sales manager, typically what that means is that you are a former top performing salesperson who had the instinct to be highly successful. But then you move into a management role. You're career ambitious. You wanted to move up, and maybe you can help other people. So spot opens up and you take it. But really now you're learning, how do I manage a lot of different types of salespeople? And you quickly realize, wow, they're not actually all like me. The things that were natural to me about prospecting, building pipeline, moving through the process, make sure I'm meeting with the right people, aren't natural to everybody else. And that, as a result, drives the reason you need to very carefully define your sales process and the activity pipeline expectations that you have to help people stay focused on what will truly move the needle. So I actually wrote a post that showed up on the OpenView Labs blog just yesterday to talk a little more about this topic if you're interested. So really, with all of this, I think in many cases, people are missing on the fundamentals. And what I mean by fundamentals is the basic fundamentals of selling and also the basic fundamentals of good, solid management. And so some kind of data that backs this up is that, companies are often letting technology overshadow action or overshadow what people are doing every day. Companies generate an enormous amount of reports and data because of all this technology that we're using. But unfortunately, that means that through this research found that 83% of the sales metrics that are talked about and thrown around in an individual company are not actionable. And what I mean by that, by actionable, is that you find that piece of data, and if you go talk to a sales rep, they might say, wow, that's really interesting, and then just go continue on about their day the way they normally do. It doesn't actually change or motivate a change in behavior that is actionable. And as sales managers, sales people, sales leaders, we need to think about what is the information I want to focus on that will inspire and drive action. The other part about it is that managers, everyone wants to be a great coach. They really want to help people be successful, but they largely just haven't been shown how. Have received very little training. The assumption is essentially, if you are great as a rep, you'll be able to help make everybody else great too. And while that can often be true, it takes some work. So as we get into, what does it take to define your KPIs and your sales process? What I first like to think about is to kind of step back and look at what does the typical sales team process look like. When I say process, I'm talking about the planning and execution process. So, what every company generally does is they make their plan for the year, for the quarter. You define your sales goals, you define your activity and pipeline expectations, whatever it might be. You do that wherever on your whiteboards, in your conference rooms, in Excel, whatever. It takes some time to do that. Then you build it out, and your whole year is basically depending on the execution of that plan. So then you use things like Salesforce reports, you use analytics software to understand and measure, like, how are we doing? Is something awry? Is there some new piece of insight that we've got that we need to take action on? We can do that. Then we use sales technology, and we all know how, there's just an enormous amount of it, to really help automate steps and move things to happen faster. So there's an enormous amount of technology out there, becoming very vitally important in the organization. But what often gets missed is the last part, which is actually getting people to do stuff. Where as human beings, we're easily distracted, easily get focused on the wrong things. We face these things in our personal life too, whether it be our health, or how we eat, or how we treat ourselves or our families, or how, our personal time, etc. When we think about it as a manager, suddenly you're responsible for a lot of people and their livelihood and their payroll, and the behaviors and actions of those people is really what you're responsible for. So overall, technology is critical, but really the ultimate performance depends on the actions of your people, and as a manager, that's where you need to help drive it. So when we think about KPIs and sales process, we can all often get lost and stuck in a lot of different potential options. We've done a lot of research on this ourselves, and of course we spend really all day, every day, helping clients figure out the right sales KPIs depending on what selling role you're in. And this is generally how we summarize it. So at the very early state of the sales process, like Shannon mentioned, and Sean is certainly an expert here, the generating pipeline is very activity focused. So if you're a sales development rep, business development rep, whatever you want to call it, you look at metrics that are very much often about activity that leads to creating opportunities, and there's a number of them that can be tracked. Then you've got actual moving through the pipeline. So whether it's inside or field reps, there's a different set of metrics that you want to manage around. And when you want to keep and grow your customer base, through your support center, account management, whatnot, there's a different set of metrics you manage around. So there's not one common set that works across the sales process. It depends on role, it depends on function, and it depends a little bit on your company. But these are certainly some of the most common ones. So before I hand it over to Sean, quickly, Shannon, I wanted to ask you, when you look at your sales organization, you think about your sales process and how that's evolved. When you look at some of these metrics, talk a little bit about how you guys have defined your sales process. I know it's changed a couple times there since you got the league. How have you been addressing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, we were just sitting in a room yesterday going through our sales process again and looking at iterating it and redefining it. I think pretty early on we had a pretty standard sales process, looking at lead, moving that to SQL, SQO, et cetera. And as we more clearly were able to define, what good looked like for each of those individual areas, we could get more prescriptive with our SDRs and BDRs on the front end with activities of, where to focus their time, what a good conversion looked like from number of dials to number of connects that they were making. And really, from the AE perspective, the numbers have changed dramatically from when we started started as far as our pipeline expectation. We focus more heavily now than we did before on late stage pipeline going into each month and having really concrete numbers around that and what we need. And so we've spelled that out for both our AE and our BDR teams as far as working back to the meetings numbers and the number of dials being able to make. So it's very clearly defined for each of the teams. And, you know, like you mentioned, those numbers change on a regular basis, whether that's because our win rate changes and we need to adjust, or whether that's just seasonality. But it's very clearly defined at each role.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool, great. Good, well, thanks for the perspective. All right, Sean, so I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little more about how you kind of align and calibrate the sales technology that you do have.
Awesome, thanks, Bob. So, I mean, first of all, if you take a step back, you know, the life of a sales rep it's difficult. They have a lot of access to data. They have a lot of access to insights where they can be more informed. So they're empowered with data, they're informed with insights, but honestly, they're overwhelmed with tooling. And that really comes down from the top level by getting bought into different ROI statements that these technologies have. But unless they're talking to each other and or they're adopted, then there is no success there. And so when you think about it, it's really about trying to have sincerity and scale, but also focus streamlined workflow and adoption. So as I was just speaking to, you know, Topo, they came out with an interesting study recently. It was an SDR technology benchmark report, and they found that the highest performing SDR teams have 5 to 8 tools in their tech stack, and that's anything ranging from CRM to email, phone, social, all the way to coaching applications. But that's a lot for a rep to manage. I mean, their job is to come in there every single day, connect with buyers and convert them into opportunities, and then continue to close those opportunities. And when they have access to this much different technology, the focus is hard for them not really to understand what is the most important thing that they should be doing. And so the best teams know that the highest performing teams, they minimize distractions. And so if you look at the second part of their study was around what do managers and leaders find valuable when they're evaluating tools, and surprisingly, the ability to have ease of use and the integration with other technologies in their tech stack ranked higher than expected ROI. And I think that really comes down to the point that adoption is the new ROI. And the fact that if they're not using the tools and you can't get them to successfully engage with them, then there is no ROI that will be had from them. And so I think it's very important to think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so yesterday I had a talk on this same topic and used a story around Sarah, who's a sales manager who took over a team recently. And she was trying to have 2 things that she wanted to achieve, which was sincerity and scale at the same time. And when you think about scale, you know, a lot of sales technology vendors are going to share the risen importance of process-oriented, building a scalable model, steeped in math and science and predictability. They'll likely highlight the importance of automated systems. They'll even start talking about things like artificial bots, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And all of that's important, but it's really not the full equation. It's the other side that makes a model sales organization, which is the sincerity. The irony of exceptional AI is that it brings us more access to humanity. You can be more empathetic, connected, informed. It's human, it's emotional. It represents understanding and sincerity. It's ethical, it's account-based, it's customer-centric. And so on this graph here, you can see kind of the sliding range of sincerity and science, and that if you have high science, so you're using automated, using AI, with low sincerity, you just end up being a robot. If you're really great at being empathetic and connecting with your buyers in a human, customer-centric way, but you can't do it at scale, then you're just a really friendly sales rep. If you can't do either of those, then you're fired. If you can't scale, nor can you be sincere. But really, the top right quadrant is where you want to be, and that is the superhero. And so you have to have process enabled with technology. And really, what we talk about internally is people, process, and then technology. And that's what she was trying to accomplish there.
I love this, Sean. I love the way that you present this, because it's always a careful balance, and it's really remarkable how, you know, even as you know, whether you're in sales operations, if you're a sales evaluating technology, if you're a sales manager, sales leader, sales rep, you know, anybody can kind of get stuck at different times in one of these different quadrants and forget the fact that unless the buyer is experiencing closer to that superhero experience, they're always going to be questioning how genuine sales rep is and actually helping them be better.
That's right. You've got to balance kind of the human and the machine, the sincere and the science. And most companies are good at one or the other. Most sellers are good at one or the other, but the best modern organizations excel at both of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I want to actually ask Shannon real quick. So, Shannon, you mentioned you spent a number of years at Salesforce. That's a pretty well-run organization, very metrics driven, high standards, that are closely managed. As when you kind of see this grid as an example, what does it make you think of in terms of what you experienced in an organization like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, yes, it is a very well-run machine, and we have all of the data at our hands, and sales managers are very enabled with any and all KPI points that they might want to know. And I think, yeah, it's very easy to get stuck in robot mode. You're just looking at the numbers on the surface level and really not digging in any further. I think that more than any other role within the organization, the manager, direct manager role is really the one that kind of brings that element of sincerity to a sales management team, and then is able to really dig in a little bit further and understand the why behind what some of those numbers might be on the surface. Yeah. Yeah,
got it. Okay, cool. All right, Sean. So when it comes to this idea of enabling and accelerating, I like you kind of shared with me some slides around these a three-step process to automate, to streamline, and to kind of always be improving. So can you share some of the thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So what the three things that we try to do, and we've seen the best organizations do, is add focus. So they want to minimize distractions by not exposing reps to too many tools. And the first part of that is by creating a streamlined process behind the scenes. And so in the same story, working with sales ops, marketing, and programs, taking those data tools, so things around predictive and any of the contact or account data, making sure that there is a go-to-market strategy agreed upon at a high level across all of the teams that are involved, so marketing and sales and the leadership team, and then coordinating with those, whether it's an account-based model or an account-focused model, just making sure that all those things are automated behind the scenes so the reps can come in every single day, they can click down their list, and they can execute those conversations. The second piece around streamlining workflow is it's incredibly important to make sure that the reps are using those tools. And so making sure that they have access to those no matter where they're working, the core being phone, email, and social, but things like insights, things like the content and video, direct mail, any of the coordination things around scheduling or integrating into Slack. It's critical that they have those things accessible at their fingertips or within their email engine so they can use them. And then finally, the most important thing is the adoption. And that's where that ROI comes in. And then finally, always be improving. So better, never best is a philosophy we use here. You can always be improving, making sure that you have a team where you can measure, analyze, and improve, and it's integrated directly into that system. And so ultimately, the goal of coaching, whether it's in the moment or post-call coaching, is that you deliver a better customer experience. And I think that is more valuable than anything else that you could possibly do, is making sure that you care more about your customers than your competitor does.
Yeah. So Sean, I was at a customer just recently who was, their goal is, how do I use all this data that we're generating through Salesforce, through sales technology, et cetera, but they were actually struggling to get good, accurate data. I think it was out of their phone system or something like that. And therefore, it almost like inhibited their ability to effectively coach their reps. So can you talk a little bit to, not even that specific example, but I know there's other examples like that, where how are companies ensuring that the data that they're able to monitor, whether it's call data, whether they're doing the recording or transcription of calls, like how do you help companies make sure that they're looking at the right objective information to enable them to be better coaches?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a single pane of glass. And so understanding what all activities are executing on, whether it's just phone, just email, a combination, adding in social, whether using content, video, you have to be able to measure each one of those different aspects separately from the other, because you have to understand what's working. I always love to tell this story. There was our best SDR when I was leading the team is a guy named Chris Smith, and he was fantastic. He probably set 1.5 times the appointments than anyone else on the team. And every week we'd go into our one-on-ones and I'd try to diagnose, Chris, what did you change this week, or what did you do differently? And the problem was he did everything differently. And he'd always say, well, I changed everything. And so you never could pinpoint what he was doing correctly, and we couldn't really improve on it or scale it across the team. And I think it's incredibly important to be able to identify the activities that are getting success and the ones that aren't working. And so the first thing is just having synchronized data that is all standardized, feeding into a central system, whether that's Salesforce, BI tool, or another coaching platform. And the second piece is then using algorithms to then pull out insights from those things. So there's so many activities that happen. I don't think any manager has enough time to go through one by one, but being able to identify what does a good call look like, what does a good email look like, what does a poor one look like, then enables you to prioritize which ones you can focus your time on. And then you can use keywords, inflection points, number of questions asked through different providers that'll pull out calls or analyze emails.
Yeah, cool, good. All right, well, so kind of the last part of this topic is something I referenced earlier. I'd call it running a closed loop management system. So really what I mean by that is that there was some research recently from CSO Insights, Chief Sales Officer, talking about how the missing ingredients to good, effective, sales management and quota attainment is that frontline manager's ability to coach the behaviors that lead to sales. So Sean just covered on some of that. I love the visual of a single pane of glass. You can really see, all right, what information do I need to pay attention to so that I can help coach in a good, accurate way. So, in order to be an effective coach, you have to understand what are those measures, what are those things that we should be paying attention to. What often happens is companies define those, but they end up defining those and they stay buried in a Salesforce report somewhere, or they stay on a whiteboard in a planning room or on a spreadsheet, at the beginning of the year, and it doesn't make its way down to the day-to-day actions and behavior of their salespeople. So, I think that oftentimes when you think through, when someone's new to sales management, they work through these stages, and so some people kind of come right in a little further along, but kind of an easy way to think through it. First of all, if I'm new to sales management, or frankly, maybe I'm stuck in the dark ages of the way sales works, I only care about what's closing. Now, that of course is what ultimately matters. How everyone gets paid and compensated and measured, et cetera, is that ultimate result. But as a manager, if you're only focused on that, and you're not looking at all of your leading indicators, it's tough to really change behavior. So the next phase that people then tend to move to is realize that, okay, I got to motivate, I got to make things happen. So I realize that not all reps are like me. I see that people tend to have stuff stuck early in the sales process, or they're not prospecting enough, whatever it might be. And then what they'll do is they'll say, hey, all right, I'm going to try to motivate behavior. I'm going to incent it. I'm going to do some contests and spiffs and leader stack rankings, et cetera, and they'll move to this process. And so it actually works, but it's not necessarily sustainable. So it's not something that, forever you can do. You can't throw a spiff at everything. And so at that point, they'll move to what I call stage 3, where they realize, like, all right, I need to have a consistent, disciplined sales process that we're walking through. And yes, you're going to have the art of sales a little bit, where you might jive a little bit on what that process is, but you've got to define something so there's a common language, and then there's very clear activity and pipeline standards, whatever that might be. So it could be anything from how many, if you're an SDR, how many calls you're making or how often you're on the phone. It could be how much pipeline you're creating. It could be, late stage, but whatever it might be, you're clearly defining a set of operating metrics that, again, don't just sit on a spreadsheet that only management talks about. They actually are part of the day-to-day rhythm of the sales rep, and where do they focus their time. So what then often happens, though, is those standards are set, and they're talked to the sales reps about, but they're not integrated into the actual coaching process. So, again, Sean just mentioned a little bit, is that when you're doing this effectively, not only do you have those standards set, but they're used to drive and arm good quality coaching conversation. So coaching is consistent, it's structured. Maybe there's a common format that all your managers go through. There's a common set of objective data that they always review. They happen every single week or every other week, without fail. And to the point, there's a defined onboarding process. So now you're moving here, and now you're really becoming a bit more of a leader or a manager to a team. And then finally, what we all aspire to is getting to that stage where everything is perfectly aligned from the executive team all the way down to the reps. That everyone's speaking the same language. They know exactly what it means. We hear people talk about, use words like I'm managing in real time, because I'm always looking at the data. My reps are always looking at the data. We always know exactly what we're doing. And again, data drives action and behavior out of people. It doesn't just sit in an analytics report, and that's really interesting at the end of the month, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore. So again, it's that management in real time. So to put a little bit more of a visual around this idea of what I call this closed loop management process, the way that we think of it is you start out the year and you build your sales or quarter, you build your sales targets. You define what are the KPIs and activity metrics that around that. You have your BI, your reports to kind of measure it. But to truly make a closed loop, you take all that data, you personalize it for every single individual rep through a scorecard or whatever you want to call it. Every rep uses that. You have a system that's monitoring all that data underneath. People can get access to it wherever they are, whether they're walking around the office or they're on their mobile phone or they're on their computer. But then you've also got the systems underneath to identify when something is going sideways. So you have a defined kind of tolerance level. Say, hey, we're falling behind. There's a warning system that happens. Like far too often in a non-closed loop process, what I find is companies say, all right, let's pull up our metrics at the end of the month. And that's when they realize, geez, we didn't have enough meetings this month. We didn't have enough pipeline this month. But now it's too late. You can't do anything about it anymore. So if you have the ability to monitor this and manage it on a day-to-day basis, you're enabled to have alerting to know, hey, if something's falling behind, I better fix it. The other part of it is when it comes to coaching is, again, there's this consistent and structured process. So you take that same exact data that you built your systems around to manage your team, and it initiates a coaching process. So, initiated by the sales rep, where they take a look at their data, they provide commentary on it, the manager takes a look at it, the manager and the rep talk together, what does this mean? What are our action steps for next week? And again, you move through the process, and that, again, it happens consistently and without fail. Similar to the above, if something is, if a goals are achieved, you've got to celebrate it. You've got to use those as best practices to help people understand, hey, John just did something great. Let's go talk to everybody else about that. Sarah just closed the deal. Let's everyone go celebrate that and learn exactly what she did that was so unique. So, how do you build all that? And then, hey, you can use a little bit of that old-fashioned I talked about, that if something's falling behind, make it interesting and exciting, and throw a reward or a spiff or a leaderboard or a contest around it, that has its place, again, in that closed loop process, as I mentioned. So, so this is the type of thing that our company specifically helps with, through the idea of scorecarding and giving you a sense of what are our overall metrics. I can keep an eye on all of it, and running through that coaching process. For a sales rep, so they always know how they're doing, where they stand, et cetera, and taking a lot of that information and broadcasting around the office as well, so that everyone's aligned and excited through the whole process. So, really, that's it. We'll kind of flip it over to some questions. But to recap, the idea is, define the process and KPIs you want to build around, align and calibrate your sales technology to fit with it, enable and accelerate your sales team using technology, and then really run that closed loop management process where you're always paying attention to it. It's not just a good idea that stays stuck again in the conference room somewhere. So, actually, we'll take some questions here, and I know we've got some coming. But I wanted to quickly ask Shannon. So, you certainly have an appreciation for the immense amount of sales technology and tools that are out there. Again, you use some of them at Salesforce. You use some of them at League. You've looked at a lot. What process do you use to evaluate and decide what you want to use? But then also, maybe you made a mistake and understand, hey, that wasn't right. How do I make a switch? So what's your process for evaluating this?
Yeah, so I think we went through this earlier this year when we evaluated level 11. Really, we recognized that there was much to a lot of the points that you're making throughout the presentation, is that we needed to get everyone well aligned on what our KPIs were. And so we went about really defining the problem there, and looked at some of the other tools that we had available to us to make sure that if we were going to go out and look on the market for another tool, that we had evaluated all of our options, and obviously we were spending our money appropriately. So from there, we did interviews with the managers, the individual reps themselves, and worked really closely with our sales operations and sales enablement team to really define what we wanted to get out of this new tool or this, specifically level 11. And then from there, really defining that implementation process. I think, on being from Salesforce and selling that technology and now being on the side where I'm purchasing a tool, one of the things that happens a lot of the time is, everyone has competing priorities. There's a lot of pressure to get certain projects done. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is people don't leave enough of a window for them to be able to implement a tool successfully. Look at implementing, testing, training, iterating, and then really rolling it out to the team. In as best a way as you can, because we all know that if you roll out a tool and it's maybe not exactly where it needs to be, that the adoption will really suffer. So we look at really defining that project management piece, obviously assigning ownership along the way, to make sure that when we present the tool back to the team, it's really well defined and everyone has a good understanding of how to use it and what they at an individual level should be looking to achieve using the tool.
Got it. All right, cool. So Sean, I had a question pop in here for you. So you guys are a fast growth company yourself. It sounds like you are looking at a lot of sales technology. What do you guys use at SalesLoft, and how do you evaluate sales technology for your own firm?
Yeah, great question. So we're in a unique scenario in that the platform that we use is our own platform, and so we drink our own Kool-Aid, but we also have that ecosystem, and so a lot of the evaluation comes really from the integration partnership perspective, in that we know that we have these things connected into our system, and so we evaluate each one of those based on its own merits and if it would fit into that process. I think to add to Shannon's point around evaluation of technologies, I think there's one important thing that we really dig into, because we put so much emphasis on it, on the way that we interact with our customers, and that's on the support and the success side. And so really digging into what the implementation process looks like from a technical perspective and how their team's going to help support, as well as the ongoing support we get either from account management or from the support team is critical in that evaluation process. And so we do a lot of research on platforms like G2 Crowd, which is the Yelp for software, and looking at past reviews of other users. There's all types of great tools out there, but really, as we talked about before, if you don't get them adopted, they just become shelfware. And so looking at the experiences that other people's had with their team internally, as far as the support they get, the implementation process, the ease of use, are critical into that evaluation process. And of course, what can the tool do itself is very important. I think it's also, we look at the companies from a partnership perspective, outside of an integration or anything like that. It just, do they treat their customers like partners, and do they feel like there's a kind of a 50-50 bond going on there? Because if not, oftentimes you look at it from the technology perspective, can this solve my problem? But if I know and I trust this team is going to be innovating quickly and they'll be supporting, then likely the long-term relationship is going to outweigh just what the capabilities are today.
Yeah, got it. Cool. So yeah, you guys have worked with a lot, but also thank you for being a level 11 customer. I know we're working closely with Derek Grant and his team, so no question we see that out there in the market too. So here's another question. This came in for Shannon. You mentioned that you have a different tier sales teams, small business and enterprise. Does your technology stack vary based on the selling role?
Not really, no. I mean, we have all of our tools available to every sales role that we have within the organization. Certainly, some might use it more than others. A perfect example of that would be SalesLoft, actually. So pretty common that your business development team would be leveraging it from a prospecting perspective, but actually our account executives teams use it across the board to make sure that they're in lock and step with all of the different stages along the way with their opportunity management. So the tools that are available are the same. The way they use it might be slightly different along the way.
Got it. Okay. All right, one other one. This will be our last question here, and we'll wrap up. So Sean, I'll have you actually take a stab at this one. My team just started using Salesforce. We have a large inside sales team. What technologies should we look at first? Tough question, but
it feels like a softball, but I'm going to approach it from a different angle. I truly believe in people, process, and then technology. And so I think the first thing is, if you just implemented Salesforce, there are some things to learn there. And so making sure that they have a good grasp of what the underlying database technology is, and coming up and making sure that you have a defined playbook and process. And then from there, the next logical step is then codify those processes into a platform that lets you execute on them. I'm not going to necessarily pitch what we do, but in any workflow application that allows you to take all those steps over those channels and put it into a process driven that you can then you can cascade over the team and review and implement would be my recommendation. From there, there's adjacent technologies around data and insights. And so making sure that you have the right account data, the right contact data, you have insights around things that they're doing, whether it's social, diving into things like different channels for communication, whether it be direct mail or video, making sure they have the right content. And then finally, the coaching aspect of it, which is usually the last thing that people look at, but it's critical into the growth of that team. And I would assume that having a large team, that you have a lot of those things set in place already today. And so it would be more about making sure they all talk to each other. Salesforce has got a great ecosystem of partners, and so it wouldn't be difficult to find those things, but you have to make sure they all come into the database as streamlined and as standard as possible. So standardizing all the activities so that you can run reports and get insights.
Cool. I'll actually, so Shannon, I'll actually throw that over to you as well. I mean, you spent so many years at Salesforce, working with customers on probably a similar topic. How would you answer that same question?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really looking at implementing some first tools, I think first and foremost, to Sean's point, you really do have to have the right data in the system. So looking at different tools to be able to do that, as well as have the proper account insights. Anything that you can do to cut out time from an inside sales rep's day on doing things like research, or even something as minute as scheduling meetings and calendaring. Those are really simple things to address right off the top that can give some time back into the day of your inside sales reps. And then, yeah, I mean, much to Sean's point as well, I think just anything that can really outline the process and the step-by-step way in which you would really like them to communicate with your customers, and also have new and unique ways in which to approach that, like video, for example. Those would all be tools that I would look at initially, and all ones that we implemented initially here at Leak.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, Sean and Shannon, thank you so much for your time here today, and more important, great thoughts and on this important topic. So thanks also to the audience. We had a great turnout here today. Hope it's good thinking for you to start noodling on preparing for 2018. So have a great rest of your day. Have a good, strong finish to the quarter, and happy selling.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.